You felt it before. That unsettling moment of recognition when you realize your new partner shares peculiar similarities with your father. Maybe it's the way he laughs, how he argues, or even gestures you thought were unique to the man who raised you. This isn't coincidence or bad luck. It's a psychological pattern so fundamental that Sigmund Freud built much of his theory of human relationships upon it. The concept seems almost too predictable: women choosing men who resemble their fathers. Yet the mechanism behind this pattern is far more nuanced and powerful than most realize. This isn't about conscious choice, but about the unconscious templates formed during our earliest years that shape our attractions, triggers, and relationship patterns throughout adulthood. Freud called this the repetition compulsion, our unconscious drive to recreate familiar relationship dynamics, even when they've caused us pain. He recognized that our first relationship with the opposite-sex parent creates a powerful imprint that becomes our blueprint for future romantic connections. This insight, shocking in his Victorian era, remains one of psychology's most enduring and validated concepts. Modern attachment theory has refined but not replaced these fundamental insights. Our relationships with our primary caregivers, particularly our fathers for heterosexual women, create internal working models that define what feels normal, comfortable, and even attractive in future partners. These models operate beneath conscious awareness, guiding our attractions despite our best intentions. Consider the daughter of an emotionally distant father. She learns early that love means yearning for connection with someone just out of emotional reach. The anxiety this produces becomes neurologically linked with romantic attachment. Later, she consistently finds herself drawn to emotionally unavailable men, not because she consciously wants the pain, but because this dynamic registers as familiar, and what's familiar feels like home, even when home wasn't always safe. Conversely, women raised by attentive, respectful fathers develop entirely different templates. They expect emotional availability and healthy boundaries because these qualities feel normal. They're more likely to recognize and be attracted to these traits in potential partners because they align with their internal models of masculinity and relationship dynamics. The most fascinating aspect of this pattern isn't its existence, but its subtlety. You might consciously reject men who overtly resemble your father, particularly if your relationship with him was difficult. Yet research shows the unconscious mind often detects and responds to similarities invisible to conscious awareness. Communication patterns, emotional responses, even values that mirror your father's approach to life. Neuroscience now confirms what Freud intuited. Our earliest attachments create neural pathways that become our reference points for all future relationships. The emotional brain learns through association, not reason. It doesn't distinguish between healthy familiarity and toxic patterns. It simply recognizes what it knows. This explains why intelligent, accomplished women can repeatedly choose partners who trigger the same painful dynamics they experienced with their fathers. This isn't limited to women with troubled father relationships. Even those with healthy paternal bonds find themselves attracted to men who embody their father's positive traits. The daughter of a kind, reliable father often seeks these qualities in partners because her emotional brain associates them with security and love. The repetition isn't problematic when the original pattern was healthy. What's particularly striking is how these patterns manifest in specific behaviors. Research shows women often unconsciously select partners whose physical affection style, from hugging to physical distance, mirrors their father's. Communication patterns show similar correlations. If your father avoided emotional discussions, you might find yourself repeatedly drawn to men who struggle with vulnerability, not because you consciously want this trait, but because your nervous system recognizes the dynamic. The pattern extends beyond personality to encompass worldviews and values. Your father's approach to money, work, religion, and social issues creates templates that feel innately right or wrong when encountered in potential partners. This explains why political or religious differences can feel so jarring in relationships, They contradict our deepest templates for how the masculine figures in our lives should think and behave. Freud's original Oedipal theory suggested children develop romantic attraction to their opposite-sex parent, later transferring these feelings to appropriate partners in adulthood. Modern psychology views this less as literal attraction and more as a template-forming process. We don't want our fathers. We want men who activate the same neural pathways established in that primary relationship. This pattern becomes particularly evident during stress or conflict. Under pressure, partners often revert to core patterns learned in childhood. A woman whose father dismissed her feelings during arguments might find her partner doing exactly the same during their worst fights. The similarity isn't coincidental. She's unconsciously selected someone who responds in familiar ways, and her own behavior may even elicit these responses. Some of the most compelling evidence for this phenomenon comes from women who were adopted or raised in blended families. Studies show they often choose partners who resemble their adoptive fathers in personality and interaction style, demonstrating that these patterns develop through relationship experience rather than genetics. What matters is who raised you, not biological connection. The pattern's power becomes clearest in women who had absent fathers. Their templates for masculine behavior and relationship dynamics remain underdeveloped or are pieced together from limited interactions and cultural stereotypes. They often report feeling they don't know how to read men or set appropriate boundaries. Without a consistent father figure, they miss the opportunity to develop nuanced models for male-female relationships. Women raised by abusive fathers face particularly complex challenges. Their nervous systems learn to associate love with fear, control, or unpredictability. This can lead to one of two common patterns: either unconsciously selecting partners who trigger the same traumatic dynamics, or choosing partners who seem completely opposite, but eventually revealing similar underlying traits. The nervous system's need for familiarity can override conscious intentions to break the cycle. Abandonment creates its own distinct pattern. Women whose fathers left often develop hypervigilance about rejection. They scan constantly for signs their partner might leave, creating anxiety that paradoxically can push partners away, recreating the original abandonment. The unconscious belief that love ends in abandonment becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy without therapeutic intervention. Interestingly, even when a father was physically present but emotionally absent, the workaholic, the emotionally distant provider, daughters develop specific patterns in response. Many become overachievers, unconsciously believing that exceptional performance might finally win the attention and approval that was scarce in childhood. In relationships, they often choose emotionally unavailable partners, recreating the familiar dynamic of working hard for limited emotional return. This isn't about blaming fathers. Men parent within their own psychological limitations, often recreating patterns from their childhoods. Understanding these influences isn't about assigning fault, but about recognizing how these early relationships shape our adult experiences of love and connection. The first step toward changing these patterns is consciousness. Simply recognizing that your attractions and relationship patterns may reflect your experience with your father creates space for new choices. When you understand why certain types of men feel familiar, whether healthily or unhealthily familiar, you can begin to distinguish between attraction based on genuine compatibility and attraction based on neurological familiarity. The work of breaking unhealthy patterns often requires therapeutic support. These connections exist at a pre-verbal, bodily level. Talk therapy helps identify patterns, while somatic therapies address how these patterns live in the nervous system. Body-centered approaches are particularly effective because relationship templates are stored not just in cognitive memory, but in the physical responses of the autonomic nervous system. The path forward isn't about rejecting men who share qualities with your father. That approach can lead to choosing partners who are different in superficial ways, but recreate similar dynamics in less obvious forms. True change comes from developing a new relationship with yourself, recognizing your triggers, understanding your needs, and learning to self-regulate during relationship stress rather than falling into familiar patterns. Many women find that healing their relationship with their actual father, whether he's living or deceased, in their lives or absent, creates profound shifts in their romantic patterns. This doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation in all cases. Sometimes it means grieving the father you needed but didn't have, setting boundaries with a difficult father, or working through anger and disappointment to reach acceptance. This internal work changes your relationship with the internalized father figure that influences your partner choices. Family systems therapy offers particularly valuable insights into these patterns. It recognizes that we don't just seek partners who resemble our fathers, we unconsciously recreate entire family dynamics. If you grew up mediating between your parents, you might find yourself in relationships where you play a similar role. If your mother related to your father in specific ways, you might unconsciously adopt her patterns in your own relationships. Developmental psychology adds another dimension to understanding these patterns. Each stage of childhood requires different forms of paternal involvement. A father who was perfect for your infant needs but struggled to support your adolescent independence creates specific developmental gaps. These gaps often become the focus of unconscious healing attempts in adult relationships, as you seek partners who might finally fulfill those specific needs. Attachment theory identifies distinct patterns based on early caregiving experiences. Secure attachment develops when caregivers are consistently responsive. Anxious attachment forms when caregiving is inconsistent, leading to relationships characterized by clinginess and fear of abandonment. Avoidant attachment results from consistently unresponsive caregiving, creating difficulty with intimacy and emotional vulnerability. Disorganized attachment stems from frightening or abusive caregiving, producing chaotic relationship patterns. Understanding your attachment style, significantly shaped by your father's parenting, offers a roadmap to your relationship patterns. Each style creates predictable dynamics in adult relationships. The anxiously attached tend to pair with avoidance, recreating the familiar pursuit-withdrawal dance. Recognizing these patterns helps break the cycle. The father-daughter relationship also shapes a woman's relationship with her own feminine identity and power. Fathers who affirm their daughters' competence, intelligence, and agency foster women who expect respect and equality from male partners. Conversely, fathers who subtly or overtly reinforce gender limitations often raise daughters who struggle to assert boundaries with men, or who unconsciously select partners who don't support their full empowerment. Fathers shape their daughters' relationship with their bodies and sexuality as well. A father who offered appropriate affection and respect teaches his daughter that her body is worthy of care and consent. Fathers who were critical, intrusive, or who sexualize their daughters create complex patterns that often manifest in adult relationships, from difficulty setting physical boundaries to disconnection from physical pleasure. Culture compounds these individual dynamics. Different societies assign varying roles to fathers and create distinct expectations for male-female relationships. Women navigate not just their personal father experiences, but also cultural father archetypes that influence their expectations and choices. These cultural patterns are so deeply internalized, they often feel like personal preferences rather than social conditioning. The most empowering aspect of recognizing these patterns is the opportunity for conscious choice they create. When you understand how your relationship with your father influences your partner selection, you can distinguish between familiar but unhealthy attractions and genuine compatibility. You can recognize when you're unconsciously trying to heal old wounds through current relationships. This doesn't mean rejecting all qualities reminiscent of your father. If your father was kind, reliable, and respectful, seeking these traits in partners makes evolutionary and psychological sense. The goal isn't to avoid all paternal similarities, but to consciously choose which qualities serve your adult needs for partnership and which recreate limitations you've outgrown. For women with difficult father relationships, healing often means experiencing unfamiliar but healthy relationship dynamics. When all your relationships have followed similar patterns, genuinely supportive, consistent, and respectful partnership can initially feel uncomfortable or even boring. Your nervous system needs time to recognize that safety doesn't mean danger, and consistency doesn't mean disinterest. Many women report that their partner preferences shift as they heal their father wounds. Qualities they once found irresistibly attractive, like emotional unavailability, masked as mystery or independence, lose their appeal. Characteristics they previously overlooked, like emotional consistency and transparent communication, become newly attractive as their own attachment patterns heal. This journey isn't linear. Even with significant personal work, stress, fatigue, or major life transitions can activate old patterns. The difference is that with awareness, these regressions become temporary rather than defining. You can recognize when you're responding from old father templates rather than present reality, creating space to choose different responses. The relationship between father patterns and partner choice presents a paradox. These patterns feel intensely personal and unique, yet they follow remarkably consistent trajectories across cultures and generations. This universality can be comforting. You're not alone in these patterns, while still honoring the specific ways your relationship with your father shaped your experience. Ultimately, understanding how your father relationship influences your romantic choices isn't about blaming your past, but about claiming your future. It's about recognizing that what felt like inevitable attractions or just your type were patterns established long before you had conscious choice, and that genuine choice becomes possible only with awareness. This awareness transforms not just whom you choose, but how you participate in relationships. You become able to distinguish between reactions based on your past with your father and responses appropriate to your present relationship. You recognize when you're unconsciously casting your partner in your father's role and expecting him to heal wounds he didn't create. The most profound change often comes in your relationship with yourself. As you understand how your father relationship shaped your self-concept, you can begin to separate his voice, whether critical or affirming, present or absent, from your own authentic voice. You discover which standards and expectations are truly yours, and which were inherited from this primary relationship. For many women, this journey reveals that the relationship they most needed to transform wasn't with men at all, but with their internal sense of the masculine as experienced through their fathers. As this internal relationship heals, external relationships naturally shift to reflect this new integration. The partners you attract and are attracted to become reflections not of your wounds, but of your wholeness. The uncanny truth Freud recognized isn't that we're doomed to repeat our father relationships in our romantic lives. It's that these patterns remain powerful until brought into consciousness, and that once conscious, they can be transformed. The very awareness that your father shaped your partner choices becomes the tool that frees you to choose differently, to love not from old wounds, but from present wholeness. This doesn't mean perfect relationships or partners. It means authentic choices based on who you are now, rather than who you needed to be in relationship to your father. It means recognizing patterns early enough to respond differently. Above all, it means the freedom to write new relationship stories no longer constrained by the limitations of your first and most defining experience of masculine love.